Right, public meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll start off with roll call. And Rob?
Here.
Dave?
Here.
Nancy? Here. Carla's here. Dave?
Here.
Alquin? Present. And Danny?
Here.
All right, any changes to today's agenda before we entertain a motion to?
We approve the agenda.
Motion by Dave, supported by Alquin, that we approve today's agenda as printed. All in favor? Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
We approve the minutes of November 6th, 2024.
Motion by Dave, supported by Alquin, that we approve the meeting minutes from November 6th, 2024. All in favor? Opposed, the same. Motion carried. At this time, we'll open it up for public comment. If we have anybody who'd like to address the board, please use the podium.
Hi, my name is Sheila. I live in Isabella County. I grew up in Gratiot County. A lot of you know me. I can't let this go. I'm sorry. Anytime I get a chance to talk about it, I'll be here. I guess I shouldn't say I'm sorry because I'm really not. I feel like I'm compelled to do this. And I didn't hear what you said about the microphone, so I hope I'm speaking clearly enough. It is my understanding that you will discuss an ordinance draft for battery storage facilities in Gratiot County tonight. And I would like to say that you have representation through your attorneys that give you a certain amount of protection. However, the citizens of Gratiot County rely on you to protect them. That being said, I believe you should come up with the most protective ordinance for these storage facilities that you can possibly come up with. If and when there's application to have such storage facilities and the ordinance does not fit into their plans, then let them go to the MPSC. As far as Act 233 and the citing of energy projects, there's litigation out there in hopes of it being overturned or modified. Over 70 townships and counties in Michigan are part of the lawsuit, and even more townships and counties have signed resolutions supporting it. We have all heard that lithium batteries can catch fire seemingly randomly, and if a lien ordinance is to be approved, you will be exposing this community to its dangerous and potentially lethal components. Do you think that the energy companies will be transparent to discuss known incidents and failures with the public when they present their applications to the county? A line has to be drawn. With all of these projects, Gratiot County will be completely encircled, closed off, and stifled to any new advancement or development or future farming because there is no space, no room for growth due to committed lands that are legally bound for decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment at this time? Okay. Move on to our next agenda item. And this is a request to amend the original resolution that we passed back when we were upstairs in the courtroom back in May of 23. So we did something similar with the Polaris over was DeSager's property, where the property owner that owned the laydown yard did not want us to remedy that when the project was done. They wanted to leave it as is. So what you have here is they're requesting that we waive 3G on that resolution and pass that amendment. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? Like I said, we did this about a year ago. We did this for that other project, so.
And that's the resolution, that's what they're asking for, is to leave the laydown yard as it is, instead of restoring it, because they're gonna basically do the same thing with it.
Any other discussion, questions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the amendment to resolution 2023-301.
Second.
Motion by Alquin, supported by Dave, that the board approve the resolution 2023-301 and the amendments listed. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carried. All right, we do have up next a special land use permit app. So I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing at 5:07. And what we have here, this is an 82-acre parcel in Hamilton Township. Basically, the landowner is wanting to exit the MDARD license, so the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural, I can't say it,
Sorry, hold
rural.
on. So you're reading from the agenda that I sent you guys, but it's been updated, which is the new copy. So in your packet, it'll be the new one. We're actually gonna review the best ordinance.
Okay, sorry. I'll
Sorry.
close the public hearing. Okay, let's review the best ordinance. We have some individuals here that are gonna kind of explain. We had quite lengthy discussion on the ordinance last month. So we have pulled in some experts to help us kind of navigate through this.
Hello, hey, Derek, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hey, this is Cindy. This is Cindy Todd with Spicer. How are you guys?
doing well. How are you, Cindy?
Good to see everybody. Actually, I could put my little camera on, so then there I am. I've got Mike Daly Martin with me as well. Actually, he's not with me. We are now in two separate places. And unfortunately, today it wasn't supposed to happen that way, but just wanted to kind of catch up with you. I know the controller had reached out to us and had asked us to kind of catch up with you guys. We had sent you a draft ordinance of a battery ordinance just to kind of get you to start thinking and talking about it. We had sent that over to your administrator, and then I believe he shared it with you, and that's kind of what you guys are kind of taking a stab at when we're looking at your last meeting. And you know, it is a draft. It was just a draft trying to get the conversation going. And a lot of elements that are in that ordinance, I think it's just as time has gone on with our wind ordinances and our solar ordinances, and then with the conditions that come out of the special use hearings and the resolutions that come out of that ordinance for the battery, excuse me, really starts to then include elements that we in the past have put into the resolution. You know, because if it's special use, you can add conditions to it. And so that's really important to make sure it's a special use permit, so you can add conditions that work best for the county. Anyway, but that would just kind of give you a little bit of a, you know, some of those additional things that are added in there that are different from I think if you look at your wind ordinance and your solar ordinance. And I think I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on some of the escrows and things like that. But as you opened up, so I know we had sent over at your ordinance, and you had questions, right, about your ordinance. And is it good, Chair, if we just kind of walk right through the questions kind of that you guys had?
Yes, please do.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And Mike's going to kind of go back and forth with me, and then we'll please is this okay if it's an open conversation and you guys just ask questions as we go?
Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, I think so. Our first question is, do these same standards apply to residential projects? So the way, you know what, Mike, why don't you start chatting on this one before I start getting into it?
Yeah. And I'm just going to loop this into to the second question, make it clear that the ordinance is for commercial projects. So the intent of this ordinance is really to cover any type of a battery system that is for utility scale, right? You know, we are charging up energy to be put back onto the grid for the use of, you know, that would be done by a utility company. And really, you know, what we're trying to do is cover these systems that are mentioned within PA 233, the new state law that went into effect last week. And really, you know, those systems are those larger systems, and they're supposed to be for utility scale. So when we talk about residential versus commercial, you know, this is really supposed to be for those public utilities, really. And that's what this ordinance is intending to cover. So And I think that question probably comes from our definition of a battery energy storage system. And we can clarify that a little bit more just to get more pitted. But our intent with this ordinance was really not to cover the smaller system, but just those that would be addressed by the state or could be addressed by the state.
But I think it's a great question because I think if you look at your solar ordinance, it does talk about smaller residential and we can kind of just mirror that same verbiage, right, Mike?
We absolutely could. Is that kind of where we wanted to go with this? Do we want to cover smaller installations as well, or do we want to keep this limited to those that would be, kind of in association with a wind or a solar project or a public utility company?
What are your thoughts on that? Do you, we talked a lot about the uniform between the two. So, we have it broken down with solar for the farms versus residential. Is that something you guys would like to see?
I think so. I think one of the big things that we said was our issue was the non-conformity of what was written versus what we already had for wind and solar. So if we can make sure that we're as consistent all the way through our zoning ordinance as possible, I think it's a good idea. Also, I think it helps define what a large battery storage is and, those smaller ones, just like wind and solar is. So.
And from a format perspective, that battery ordinance is just a draft ordinance that we have had that we just shared with the administrator. So it would definitely, we definitely would form it so it would follow exactly the way your ordinance reads and works, if that makes sense. Because I know the format look different, right, from what the regular ordinance looks like right now.
Dina, I see that you have your hand raised. Did you have a comment or something to add to that?
Yeah, I sure do. And this is Dina Isabel with Consumers Energy. I did just want to add that, state siting, I believe it's 50 megawatts.
It is.
And so, below that, that's still a pretty good sized battery. So I do think it's important that you guys really think about that as you build your ordinance out, to make sure you really look at the different sizes of batteries and really how that pertains to the township. So, that's still a fairly large battery, and there's a lot of developers out there that are looking at putting in smaller batteries that are still considered utility scale that fall under state siting. So I just really wanted to add that in there. I think it's important to understand that not everything that is utility scale is going to be 50 or up. So just want to share that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's helpful, Dina. And I think that's why too, for this particular ordinance that we start with 10 megawatts rather than 50. I think the idea is to try and capture, all of those potential utility scale projects. But we will definitely break this out based on small scale versus utility scale for definition and kind of come up with a different criteria for those.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. And so then our next question was, which districts would be included would the best be allowed, and allowed only by the special use land use permit. And the recommendation would be just to match our solar and wind ordinance, are the districts within those.
I believe currently is the AG, RP, RR, and I1 districts.
Right.
And to have this permitted as a special use permit.
And just a reminder, because the special use permit, we talked about a little bit in the beginning, but that special use permit really gives us that ability to go at a public hearing and have a resolution that follows the application. And then that resolution, the special use gives you the ability to add conditions to the application. So every application may or may not be different, but then it gives the commission the ability to make conditions in addition to how the ordinance reads, to be approved. And that's just this is a very nice opportunity, if something comes up on these projects. Because we have the same that we have with solar and wind. So would that work to have it in the same districts that you guys have the wind and the solar?
So how would that address, we talked about having the ordinance be reflective for smaller personal or you know, farms would be in agriculture, but maybe some smaller farms are in a residential district possibly. So I think that just for consistency, we'd have to have something in there to address those smaller batteries, storage facilities as well. All through a special land use. I would, you know, I'm not saying it should be automatic in any district, but if we're gonna say it's a, you know, you could potentially have a smaller one, chances are it might be in a residential district.
And I think that'll be noted in the breakdown between the two, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, that's,
But it would have to be addressed then.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a fair
Yep.
point.
Could it be possible to have it in an industrial district as well with, as a battery backup? I think that's important to also include. That is also a potential.
Right.
That's being looked
I
at.
think it is already
Yeah,
in
I
I
thought
one,
so.
right? Yeah, it's already in I one,
Yeah, it
so,
definitely should be.
Yeah, right.
One of the first places I would put one of those.
I mean, the way solar and wind is, right?
The way solar and wind is correct, yeah.
Right.
Our previous draft didn't define that. I think the intent was just to have some discussion about it, but yep, I think that's a good point.
Okay. Let's see if we hit all those. Yeah, so we talked about it. Definitely should be a special use, not by right. Any restrictions in the Zoning Enabling Act regarding limiting a special land use by district or by right. Now, Mike, there's no restrictions in the zoning ordinance, correct? I mean, in the Enabling Act, excuse me.
Not pertaining to this use. I guess I was kind of looking for maybe a little bit more feedback from the planning commission on what they were kind of looking for from that question.
Speak to it.
yeah.
So when they were discussing it, basically the question that was arise was they wanted it to limit this use to certain districts. And they just wanted to make sure that there weren't any restrictions at all, whether in the Zoning Enabling Act or in state law or anything, to being able to limit it to certain districts within the county. Does that make sense? Basically, they just want to make sure that
Yeah.
they can say it only goes in this district, but not this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, you can, you know, I think this kind of brings up the question of, you know, what is our intent with this ordinance? Are we trying to write a CREO that exactly mirrors the state law? Or are we trying to create an ordinance that maybe goes a little bit further, but would be considered workable for a lot of developers? They would still want to go through the local permitting process rather than getting permitted by the state and the MPSC. I believe the state law does not, you know, it says that these uses would be permitted by right in all districts. So, you know, by putting this into a special use and calling out districts that it could be permitted in, you know, you're technically going further than the state law. But I mean, just I guess how we understand, you know, most developers would be open to still complying with these regulations as long as they're reasonable. And maybe that's a fair question for, you know, our you know, developers. You know, do you find, you know, would you find, you know, doing a special use permit would be, you know, reasonable and something you'd be willing to do rather than going and getting a permit from the state?
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that's what that means. Okay. So then we'll go to, what number are we on? I think we are on 5. 5, is there a reason the layout of the various sections, escrow/permit requirements, complaint process, et cetera, do not match the layout of the wind energy ordinance? And that just goes back to in the beginning. This is just a draft ordinance that we have That's just a very generic ordinance with points on it that we just will definitely, for the county, we'll make sure that it follows exactly how the ordinance is written, you know, the standards within the existing ordinance. So it would look and match the template as it exists today for the county ordinance. That works.
Yep.
Sum it up. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what we have here. Subsection 3A is 10 or 20 megawatts recommended. Should we have different restrictions for BESS under 10 or 20 megawatts and stricter restrictions for BESS over 10 or 20 megawatts? I think, Mike, you kind of covered that a little bit, but if you want to cover that a little bit again.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like we did kind of start our discussion with this, you know, breaking this up based on, you know, those utility scale battery storage systems and those that are for private use. I think that would be our recommendation. And, you know, I think that, you know, the state law, I think it was correctly pointed out that 50 megawatts is the threshold under the state law. You know, we suggested 10 to try and cover, you know, a wider range of utility scale systems. But I think that moving forward, as long as this is, you know, the feeling of the Planning Commission, is that we would just split that up based on private and utility scale and kind of provide some resources about how we came up with those different thresholds.
Yeah, what's the difference between, I mean, size-wise, sound-wise, all of that between 10, 20, and 50? What's the difference?
Well, I think that there are different types of batteries that are used based on the capacity. I do know that. You know, as far as size, I guess that's kind of a difficult question for me to answer just off the cuff right now. I'd like to be able to provide some resources for you though, when we come back with the revision, just so that you can kind of get a better understanding of what those would look like at the different megawatt thresholds and different types of battery systems.
So let's say somebody has a small hobby farm, you know, what would they look like? I mean, let's say, what would they need in capacity? You know, they've got some chickens and a couple of horses and a barn, and they want to be able to have some backup, you know, storage of energy. What are they looking at? I'm just trying to understand what the difference between commercial, if we're going to put these in different districts, what is the difference? How do we measure that?
Much less than 10 megawatts.
Right.
Okay. So then it would make sense for us to look at, let's say 10 or 20 under would be one designation, and anything above 20 would be a different designation, which would allow us more control over anything that's going to be considered larger. Right?
Correct.
Makes sense to me.
And we can we can update a draft and get it back to you guys to really get your thoughts on it and get your eyes on it. I mean, this is, like I said, it was the beginning, kind of get our thoughts going. And I think this is a good conversation just to kind of keep hashing through it. What does it say? Subsection 3B and C uses alternate verbiage from the wind ordinance. And this is just so, yeah, I guess it goes back to make sure that everything is uniform, follows how our existing ordinances read. Subsection 5, 9540, standard for battery storage systems and equipment and or applicable nationally recognized. Yes.
I think it's just a small change to the wording.
Yeah, small change. This is just wording clarifications. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. 6A, clarify who reviews the detailed safety plan. Okay, that makes good sense. Fire authority, planning commission, emergency management, absolutely.
Yeah, I think typically it seems like the fire authority would review that pretty closely and want to make sure that they understood any type of safety procedures that they would need to take. And yeah, and maybe that's a good addition to this ordinance would be to have them review and approve it.
And usually then if you remember with our solar and our wind, we definitely had those in those conditions as well that, permit, because a permit wouldn't be handed out until we had approvals from all of the applicable, agencies, local, state roads, everybody that's involved with this project. We would need their permits, the county would need their permits before Bill or anybody issues any type of construction permits or approvals from, so those are part of also some of your condition, but that's a good thing to add to this as well. That'd be like fire.
So what you're saying is like, if you had a proposal for a battery storage unit system, one of the things is we could have the local fire department look over it and make sure for like fire suppression and things like that.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you're going to want the fire department to be working with the applicant during during the installation. So everybody understands. I mean, if there is something, or fire that goes wrong, everybody understands exactly what the course of action is, right? With these battery storages, fire control is different than general fire control, right? Because it's an electrical type of fire. And I know they really have them all kind of isolated off. And, the idea is if something happens to one of those cells, the concept behind that is that it burns. I mean, Dina can talk to it, but the concept is it burns out and it doesn't start all the other ones on fire. That's kind of the idea behind it, because there's a lot of major fire reinforcement and blocking, and I'm not using the right verbiage on that, but that's around each of those cells if something did go wrong in them. But it's really, really important that everybody knows what that process is.
Yeah. Cynthia,
yeah.
you did a great job, actually. I think you pretty much nailed it. But honestly, the most important thing is just to have and require an emergency response plan. I think that's really important. Have that reviewed and approved by your first responders. And then also really kind of require maybe like an annual walkthrough, walk down and training, because it is different. It is a different process and how that gets handled. It is not like a standard fire. So that's just really the most important thing, is just to make sure everybody really understands what that is, how to handle it, what to do, what that looks like, and then everybody's on the same page on an annual basis. So that would be really my recommendation. We're really going through that right now with a fire suppression system, and that fire suppression system is going to be managed a little bit differently. So that would be my recommendation, to kind of work through that. So that way everybody that is involved knows exactly what to do, and they get refreshed every single year. So, that would be the recommendation. You could build that right in.
Perfect.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, then it says subsection 6H. I think we're just kind of looks like we're looking to add. It says meets the requirements of the National Electrical Code, and then we want us to add current Gratiot County zoning ordinance requirements. That's perfect. So we just add that to the verbiage. That's great.
Yep.
Let's see what this one is. So should setbacks be more restrictive? Wind turbine ordinance was 1,000 feet. Is 350 or 50 protectant to the non-participating landowners? Oh, I got little squiggles on mine. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is a discussion that we need to have. I mean, the state law has some setbacks that are put in there. It's 300 feet from the nearest point of an outer wall of an occupied dwelling is what the state standard is. And then 50 feet from measured from the nearest edge of a public right of way, and 50 feet from a non-participating property line. So I think this is just a starting conversation for us with the setbacks. I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to you to kind of determine what you think is going to be reasonable and what a developer would be, try and find that line on, is this protective and will somebody actually go through this permitting process locally versus going through the MPSC to get a permit?
Right, and I don't know, I know, there's other battery ordinances that, am I correct, Chair, that you guys have been reviewing, like you reviewed like New Haven's and North Shades, their battery ordinances recently, is that correct?
Yes. And I was just gonna bring that up because I have North Shades right in front of me because they just printed it in the newspaper a week or so ago. And
Okay.
theirs is 400, 100, and 300. And so it's 400 from the nearest point of the outer wall, 100 feet from the nearest edge of the public road right of way, and 300 feet measured from the nearest shared property line. They don't even have that little non-participating. They just have from, the shared property line. So that's quite a significant difference to what we were looking at, 350 and 50. I don't know what the other one was, but it seems like it was more restrictive as well in Gratiot County, if I remember correctly.
For North Shade? Or New Haven, yeah. And so, like Mike said, it really kind of comes up to the commission and what you're comfortable with. If we wanted to have consistency with other ordinances within the county, it just becomes your call.
My thought on that is let's do some more research to see what other townships throughout the county.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I brought this today, because I thought, wow, here's one that's going before their township right away, and it would make sense if we could be somewhere close to, even if it's not matching, because I think some of the townships are going to be different. So anyway,
It'd be
but
nice to be close
right.
to everybody, but how big would one of these facilities have to be? Is a question I have. I mean, how much space, how much land would one take up?
Gonna depend on the size. So 5 acres for a large scale project,
Okay.
on average is what you're looking at.
Let's do some research on those setbacks and maybe we can reach out to some of the township officials to maybe get the thought process behind the increase.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think last month when we were talking about it, there was conversation about other ordinances in the state being more restrictive, while the one U of M produced was similar to this one. So. But
North Shades or North New Haven?
I have North Shades,
New Haven's, it's 400, 100, 300.
so it's the same as North Shade. 400, 100, 300.
So most of these, depending on the size, are gonna be co-located, with a renewables project for utility scale or co-located with a substation, right? So when you're looking at utility scale projects, that's where they're gonna be co-located. So it's gonna be, in a layer or a district that is gonna be tied with a solar project or a wind project or by a substation, right? Because that's typically what they're going to be tied with. The intent is to work with those types of projects, whether it's with a solar project or a wind project to complement them, or with a substation to provide more reliability. So from a utility perspective, those are going to be the items in the locations they would be co-located with. And you're on a smaller scale, that could be totally different. So maybe there's an opportunity to look at breaking that out a bit when you're looking at your setbacks. Just providing a little bit of guidance there if that's helpful.
Or it would make sense then to have that verbiage of the non-participating property line versus any property line. So.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, did I miss one? All right. So, why was 55 dBA chosen? That's right now what the state is, right, Mike?
Yep.
That's why I was
Um,
joking.
And North State has 45. I don't know what New Havens is. But it would be, I think we had even talked about being able to know what the difference between 45 and 55 means to a person's ears. You know, and I know it seems like 55 is what our wind ordinance is. So, you know, trying to keep things consistent makes sense to us, but as I looked through, I noticed that the other one, theirs was reduced to 45, so.
Right.
Chris, do you have, is it, okay.
Hmm.
And we have a fun sheet, just kind of shows you DBA and the difference, you know, DBA levels and what is comparable to like in a general, just general things during the day, you know, so you can kind of see what, just you, maybe you have that, I don't know if we gave that to you in the past, but it's just, well, it's not really fun. It's just interesting to understand, you know, different DBA levels and what 55 really equates to, you know, whether it be a lawnmower or whatever it might be. So those are just to give you an idea, and we can get that over to you just so you have a general reference on that.
And maybe that's something where depending on the district, if you're in an industrial zone, 55 might be okay, but in a residential zone, maybe not. You know,
Yeah.
maybe it should be more restrictive in certain zones. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. And also what Dina had said, you know, kind of where these are going to be located. You know, they're all going to be located where all the power is, you know, if it's going to be tying into the system, you know, it's going to be located where all the power is already. So that's, you know, and a lot of those, depending on where those are located within the county and the different townships, you know, is kind of to determine, you know, what kind of noise level is going to come out of those and who's going to get affected by that. But usually most of those are, I mean, it just really, I'm not going to make a generalization, but it would just depend on where those substations are.
Does it compound? So, like if you have one piece of property and it's running at 55, and then the next piece of property over is running at 55, is there like a compounding effect? Since, you know, we're talking about them being located near something already. If you've got a windmill that's making 55 decibels, and then, you know, you got your you know, is it gonna seem even louder, or it have no bearing on it?
Well, we would definitely, you know, as the ordinance and also, you know, as we would move on with any type of conditions, make sure that a sound study would be done, you know, pre and post construction. And then, you know, depending on how the pre sound study came back, you know, then it'd be up to the planning commission to kind of make a determination, you know, if it needed to be mitigated in some way, shape or form. So those are things that we can ask the applicant, you know, at the time of submittal, you know, to include all of the, you know, what we've done in the past, like with solar, we've gone and said, you know, really the way a lot of ordinances read is just like they do a sound study just for the solar, but then we say, okay, include the solar, but then also the turbines. And what does that give us? You know, what does that give us in sound, and what kind of a decibel is that, you know, within each of the regions? So you definitely can request that.
Thank you.
What's our next one? Subsection 9A. Do these landscape requirements match existing ordinance? Should requirements within American nursery standards be removed? So American nursery standards really is a standard that really just ensures that we have best practices for plant material that is being installed. Just the way the plant material looks, the quality of the plant material, where the plant material is coming from. So I would not want us to remove American nursery standards, because it's just a national standard for the quality of plant material that you're going to get, you know, as either a visual or a vegetated buffer around these. And that's just my recommendation and our recommendation on those. Was there a concern about that, or what are we thinking? What was that? What was the thought behind that conversation?
I think it was just the consistency with the solar and wind, and we did not have that
Oh, I
verbiage
got you.
in either. So
I
that
got
was,
you.
that was
Gotcha.
the concern.
Okay.
Okay.
And maybe
Okay,
it's
yeah.
just something that we need to add to our solar and wind. You know, flip it the other way.
Right. Yeah, it's just good. It's just a good best practice type of thing. Subsection 9C, not exceed 12 inches match current wind ordinance requirements. Should this be not applicable in the country? Does it be country or county? Should be in the country.
Yeah,
They're talking about rural areas, yes, that's
Yeah,
what we're talking about, or residential areas, we talked about weeds and things like that, I think that's what we're talking about, isn't it, was grass, vegetation heights.
Right.
Which I believe that 12 inches is standard across for the solar and the wind. So
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see, we've got subsection 14C, add language that sound study in response to noise complaints be paid for by the applicant if found in compliance with ordinance, be paid for by the applicant company if found not in compliance with ordinance.
a question
Yeah.
on that too was, is that permittable with the Michigan Zoning and Enabling Act, or is that just, not allowed?
think
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy. Yeah, no, I think we've seen that within resolutions for these special use permits when it comes to at least solar. Just to try and cut down on nuisance complaints. I have not personally seen this worked into an ordinance before. I think it's a good thought. I'm not sure if we want to go as far as, putting this in our ordinance right now, or just kind of keep that in mind that, if there is a concern, on the behalf of the developer, you could put this in there to kind of cut that down.
Right, because you'll put in your in your agreements that there has to be like a complaint resolution, like Dina was talking about. There's a complaint resolution, and there'll be a certain amount of time that the I'll say the developer has, that if a complaint does come in, that they have time to respond to that, and then they need to sit down and let the township know and the planning commission know, what the complaint was and how it was resolved, and how it was mitigated. But I don't know. I mean, when it comes for, I don't know when we talk about the complainant. Have you guys had issues with that? Is that where that's coming from?
Where I remember talking about it last month, or whatever, because my experience with the township that I serve on is there's certain types of uses you can imagine where they're not as popular with some of the neighbors, and if they do get approved, people come in and will complain saying it's noisy or it's too bright. We told you this was gonna be a problem, and when you do a study, okay, nope, your data you're not consistent. That's because of who you hired it. They're giving you the response they want. If you find out the sound or the light or anything like that is within compliance, 2 or 3 months, 4 months go by, they complain again. You don't want to keep having to have the developer, whoever owns the property, constantly do studies to find out whether it's sound, light, or anything like that. And I just thought that might be something we would at least entertain talking about if we're in the beginning stages of this ordinance, because of some of those nuisance complaints that may come up. Because if this is a special use process, you can imagine there's going to be people for and against these. The ones that are against it could come in and say, these are louder than you're saying, because if you look at sound, that's subjective. At midnight on a humid night, sound's going to travel a lot further than it would be during the daytime. Or if it's 4 PM, they're getting it's louder or anything. The decibels are what they are, but just somebody consistently complaining about it, you wouldn't have to want to keep spending money on studies just to prove you're within compliance. So if you're within compliance, just if there's a nuisance complaint, a forewarning, like, hey, they've passed it, we want to go further with this, just to let you know, if there is a study, you may have to pay for it because they have been in compliance within the last certain amount of time. Something to consider.
Right. Yeah, like Mike said, not necessarily have you seen it in ordinances before. It definitely could be in your resolution. But we can probably try and put some wordage on that and verbiage on that and see how that would look. Yeah. Do you think, Mike?
Thank you.
That'd be fine.
All right, subsection 15, remove underlying property owner. Is this in the wind ordinance? Oh, so
Yeah,
this is in reference to decommissioning, is this right?
Yeah,
Correct.
this is in reference to decommissioning, and it says, if the owner of the project or the underlying property owner fails to remove or repair. Well, if somebody's leasing that from, for the battery storage, it shouldn't fall on the property owner. It should fall on who is, gaining the special use permit, for the substate or for the, battery storage.
But if they go, so if the people, right, and that's exactly correct. That's exactly how it should roll. I
Right.
guess my question is what if the people holding the easement or the lease go away, and then the property owner that has entered into that agreement, it's going to be the township's responsibility to decommission that?
Well, I guess I thought that's part of what we have that bond structure for, is so that it would take care of a situation like that, so that it wouldn't fall on the landowner or the township.
Right, right. Yeah, there's definitely that language in there for your bonding. Okay. All right, let us kind of noodle that one around and see if we can kind of massage that word a little bit for you. And I don't know, Mike, if that is in their wind ordinance. I did not look.
That's a good question.
Actually, it would probably be more in the solar. I probably look in the solar. I did not pay
I
attention
think
to that one in the
the
solar.
solar's been updated a little bit more recently.
Yeah. Is that okay if we kind of noodle that around for you?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, and that's it. I think that's it.
Yeah. Yep. I think that was the last comment.
So we can most definitely, we can talk more about it if you guys want to talk more about it, but we can take it back and, now that we've all kind of chatted a little bit, put another draft together, make it look like what we have already in hand with our solar and wind ordinances. Make it so it's a little bit more consistent, pull those elements in that we talked about, and then get another draft out to the commission, if that works.
That works, yes.
Question from the townships, that relates me, if I could ask. Chris Osteroff, County Administrator. Several of the townships are being approached by developers who are wanting to stay off the tax roll and offer a PILT schedule. I was wondering if you could help explain to us the pros and cons of each of those, because I think there's going to be a lot of people watching this tomorrow for that very specific question.
Yes. So, PILT structure. So basically that's a payment in lieu of taxes. And what I can do, and I don't know if this is going to be helpful, I can send, this is specifically more for like solar and wind. I don't really have any calculations for battery structure yet. But basically, instead of getting taxes, you can get payment up front, calculated payment up front. So that way you're basically getting it all up front, instead of kind of the depreciation. So let me pull it up. It's going to be a little bit harder for me to like do this like verbally, but what I can do is I can kind of share what that looks like a little bit. Give me 1 second as I pull up the calculations. But the payment in lieu of taxes calculation. So let's just say payment in lieu of taxes for 100 megawatts. So you're going to get like $7,000 for 100 megawatts. So that's a $700,000 annual payment. So you have $700,000 over 20 years is going to be $14 million over the term of the payment in lieu of tax agreement. So that's projects built on brownfield sites that could garner an additional $2,000 per megawatt. So that's just something to include in additional. So basically what you're seeing is total revenue of $14.5 million. So you have the ability to look at this essentially fund upfront. And the reason that this is an opportunity to do this is just, again, to look at getting funds up front as opposed to kind of the depreciation and the tax, right? Known dollars up front. I have some PDFs that I can share that kind of do the tax breakout and kind of some cost for both solar and for wind, kind of show you what that looks like. I don't think I have anything for battery yet, but that's what PILT structure is intended to do. It's kind of intended to take the guesswork out of what your taxes are going to be. Brought about by kind of looking at different tax numbers and different kind of tax multipliers and some concerns about that. So that's basically what PILT is and what the structure is behind that. You know what it is, you get the numbers up front, you can calculate it right away, and you know what you're going to get. It was probably a little hard to understand as I was kind of doing the math verbally, but I have some one-pagers that I can send out that you guys can kind of look over, and then you can share and send out to your townships. So I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions on that. And some of those can be partnered with brownfields and some other components like renewable ready funds. Does that make sense?
So the PILT structure would be a one-time payout as opposed to getting whatever the royalty payments, however you want to call it, rents over time. Okay. Here's a question I have with that, and I'm not somewhere near anybody that would be hit with this because I don't have the property, but so let's say a developer hits you with this $14 million deal. And over time, they don't produce the energy they had anticipated. Do they come back against the person that they just gave this money to and try to recoup any of that?
As opposed to the 14 megawatts. So you're saying,
So instead of 14 megawatts, they only produce 10. So now they've just paid you for this lump sum for 14. Are they going to try to get the 4 megawatt, the payment for 4 megawatts back? You know, that's a question. As somebody who's being approached, that would be a question I would ask.
Yeah, I don't think so. Let me confirm. And when I send that out, I'll put that in my email. I don't think so, but let me confirm that.
All
Right.
thanks.
Dina, I believe it's based on nameplate capacity, not actual production.
Thank you, Joe. I forgot you were on there. Nameplate capacity. So that does help. So that kind of takes the guesswork out of it.
One more question for you. So would there be some sort of present value calculation that is into that? So if it is a $14 million 15-year payment schedule, 15-year tax schedule, would they be offering $9 million up front?
So yeah, so my example was 20 years for 14 million. So yes, it would be paid up front.
Not the 100% of it. It would be a
Reduced rate.
it'd be a reduced amount because you're getting paid.
Mhm.
Correct. Okay.
Correct.
So that would be, they could look at that as a downside.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding that? Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. All right, I think next we need to decide on when we would like to schedule a public hearing, or do we want to wait until we get another draft ordinance and then go ahead and schedule that?
I'd like to wait for a draft.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and so thank you. Thank you for your time. Does anybody have any other questions for Cindy or?
As we're going to receive other ordinances in the county, are we going to pass along what we've discovered to before we get another draft so that we can say, maybe we want to be more in compliance with what's happening through the rest of the county? Or do we want to just bring that back? Yeah, as we're reviewing and just whatever we get, whatever the revisions are, and then we just review it at that time.
I say we send them off right now with what we've discussed, all those questions, and then in the meantime, let's take a look at what other ordinances are stating. And we can bring that to the meeting when we see that draft.
Okay.
Maybe make those amendments or changes. Yeah.
Public hearing, compare and contrast and see what we want to average it out.
I think maybe that's the best way. What do you think, Cindy? Is that?
Say that again one more time. What was the?
So we're gonna compile some of the other local ordinances throughout some of the other townships in our county. Would it be best for us to just, do that research while you're drafting, with these amendments? And then come back when we have, before we schedule the public hearing, when we come back to review that updated draft?
So, I mean, you guys can, or we can pull them as well and just, update it as we talked about. And then we come back to you guys and say, hey, these are the, the 2 or 3 that have been approved in our past within, the other townships. If you want us to, just kind of compare those, if that helps. Would that be
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
helpful?
that
Or,
would be
I'm
great.
just trying to make it so it's
Yes.
easier for you.
Yes.
Comparable counties too,
Great.
the other ones they're looking at, obviously.
Do you want counties or townships?
By counties too.
If you could do local townships within our county and then maybe some surrounding counties to see what, if there are ordinances passed in other surrounding counties.
Okay, surrounding counties, so perfect. So we'll do surrounding counties and then we'll do what's local within us, within the Gratiot County.
Yeah, that would be great.
Mhm.
Okay. And like I said, I think we knew of those 2 that I think have already passed. I think Pine River's also working on one. So, okay. Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And our
Okay.
next meeting, are we having a meeting on January 1st?
Hi, that was me.
Yeah.
I'll show up on January 1st. It would actually be the Wednesday after that, which I believe is the 7th.
Okay.
So you will have a meeting on January 7th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the 8th. I'll take Dave on this one.
Okay,
That is also the meeting where we do elections,
organizational. Yeah.
organizational stuff, yes.
Okay. Will you have that draft prepared for us at that meeting, or should we look to schedule something further out?
I don't know, Mike, what do you think? We can shoot for it.
I
Yeah,
think we can do that.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
definitely shoot for it. Yeah, absolutely. You said 8th, right? The 8th?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fun.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you guys very much. Have a great holiday.
Thank you.
Yes, you guys too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next item on our agenda. Let's move back to our special land use application. So I will open the public hearing at 6 p.m. And what we have here, 82-acre parcel, Hamilton Township. The landowner, like I said, wants to exit from the MD-ARD license. This is an apartment complex. It's a residential farm worker dwelling that's already been in use. It's already permitted, everything's there. They just want to be able to conclude that license. So does anybody have any questions on that? Did want to have a discussion?
So they want to exit from, so they're saying we don't want to use this anymore.
Right.
Okay. And it just seems strange to me that they wouldn't want to just keep it just in case.
So, sorry, so they do want to still use it. They just don't want to do it under MDRD's regulations.
Thank you. That's,
Yeah.
okay.
The unit is not like a typical unit, and so they're having to keep up with certain things that really aren't necessary.
Mhm.
So I think that's
I
the
see.
plan behind it, the reasoning behind it.
Okay, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, they keep saying I'm in compliance with this and we comply with that, and then, but we don't want to do this, so that helps me understand that better, so.
Basically, it is a giant house with
Mhm.
17 bedrooms that are used by 17 separate workers. But because they're under the MDRD license, they have to treat it as if it was like an apartment complex. And it's obviously not set up that way, so the regulations that are required don't necessarily fit what they're using.
Probably don't want.
So they have communal areas then,
Yeah, so they all share a
Kitchen
kitchen and
yeah, living room, that kind of stuff, okay.
Because I know, that, yes, the ag rentals are much different than house inspection processes, so thank you.
What do you need from us, Carla, then?
Well, first of all, is there any public comment in regards to the special use permit? Okay. All right, any other comment from the board? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at 6:02. So what we need now, we need the motion to either approve, deny, approve with conditions for the special land use.
Motion we approve the special land use request from, or parcel 06-018-00400.
Support. All right. Motion by Danny, supported by Nancy, that we approve the special land use application for parcel 06-018-00400 for the DeSaggers and Milk Star LLC. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carried.
0 zoning complaints submitted in the month of, it should be November. Again, zoning permits issued in November. There's 1 in Lafayette, 2 in Sumner. For new business, do you guys want to do your training in January as planned, or with the new developments of having to review the draft ordinance again? If you push it back, you may run into having to deal with the public hearing. If you push it back, you might run into not being able to access these videos anymore.
So you're encouraging us to do this in January, right?
If you find it to be useful. So there are 2 topics within the videos. One of them pertains to basically just how you act and how you, basically how your decisions should be made as a planning commissioner. So basically, it's just like a recap of why you guys chose to be commissioners and how you make your decisions, how you guys present yourselves to the public, that kind of thing, morals versus ethics. The other one is more of a resource video that basically just throws a bunch of information at you that you already know, but maybe you need a reminder on.
How long are these videos?
One is 36 minutes, the other is 45.
Might as well just plan on doing them that night. So after 6, be another 30 minutes from now, just do it.
So we'll have the review of the battery storage and the 2 training for sure.
In our organizational meeting.
You guys like pizza for dinner?
So that'll be on January 8th.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Chicken.
All sounds great.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Support.
Motion by Dave, supported by Al Quinn, that we adjourn tonight's meeting, 6:05. All in favor? Opposed, the same? Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.
Make sure I was right on that.
That's right.
I was too fast, but I do a little repeating.